September 1944. The Allies are winning. Paris is liberated. The German army is in retreat. And Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery has a plan. A bold plan. Maybe too bold. Operation Market Garden. Drop 35,000 paratroopers behind enemy lines. Seize a series of bridges across the Netherlands. Punch through to Germany and end the war by Christmas. It was the largest airborne operation in history, and it failed, spectacularly. But here's what most documentaries won't tell you. The battle wasn't lost in the fighting. It was lost in the planning rooms, on the tables where men studied maps that were wrong, intelligence reports that were ignored, terrain analysis that was fatally flawed. This is the story of how bad information killed thousands of men before they even landed. Let me show you what I mean. The plan looked beautiful on paper. Drop paratroopers at Eindhoven, Nijmegen and Arnhem. Seize the bridges. Then British 1036 Corps, 30,000 vehicles, would race up a single road, 64 miles in 2 days. Link up with the paratroopers, cross the Rhine at Arnhem, drive into Germany's industrial heart, war over. Montgomery called it 90% chance of success. His staff loved it. Churchill loved it. Eisenhower, skeptical but desperate for a breakthrough, approved it. And sitting in all those planning meetings were maps, dozens of maps, of the Dutch countryside, the roads, the bridges, the drop zones. Those maps were disasters, and people knew it. They just didn't listen. Start with the terrain. The Netherlands in September 1944 was not what the maps showed. Most Allied maps were based on pre-war Dutch surveys. Beautiful maps, detailed, but 5 years out of date. 5 years of German occupation. 5 years of deliberate flooding. 5 years of fortification. The Germans had flooded huge sections of the countryside. Polderland, reclaimed from the sea, now deliberately returned to water. This wasn't on the maps. British planners saw fields and farmland. What existed was swamp, canals, dikes, soft ground that would swallow tanks. And that single road, the one XXX Corps would race up. Highway 69, running from the Belgian border to Arnhem. On the maps it looked fine, a raised highway. But in reality, it was elevated above the flooded polders. 1 lane in most places. 2 at best. Built on sandy soil. No shoulders, just steep embankments dropping into water or marsh. One British engineer looked at this and said it was insane. You'd have 30,000 vehicles trying to funnel up a single road, bumper to bumper, 75 miles of traffic jam. Any breakdown, any destroyed vehicle, and the whole advance stops. And if the Germans figured out what you were doing, which they would, they'd have every artillery piece and anti-tank gun pointed at that road. He was right. But the plan went ahead anyway. Then there's the bridges themselves. 9 bridges that had to be captured intact. This is where the maps really failed. Several bridges were drawn incorrectly, wrong sizes, wrong approaches, wrong defensive positions around them. Take the bridge at Nijmegen. On Allied maps, the approaches looked straightforward. In reality, the southern approach was a maze of medieval streets, narrow and winding. The northern approach was wide open, with German fortifications dug into the riverbank. None of this showed up clearly in the planning. And Arnhem, the final bridge, the prize. The British 1st Airborne Division would drop nearby, seize it, and hold until XX Corps arrived. Simple. Except the drop zones were picked based on maps showing flat, open terrain. What nobody adequately marked was that those drop zones were 6 to 8 miles from the bridge, through suburbs and woods. Why drop so far away? Because the maps suggested closer areas were too wooded, too built up, too risky. Some of that was true. But 6 miles? That meant the paratroopers would have to march with all their equipment through enemy territory to reach their objective. Hours of delay built into the plan from the start. Now, let's talk about the intelligence failures. This is where things get really dark. Because people saw what was coming, they warned their superiors, and they were dismissed. British intelligence had reconnaissance photos, aerial photographs taken in early September, just weeks before the operation. These photos showed something terrifying at Arnhem. Tank tracks, lots of them. Large vehicles under camouflage netting in the woods near the city. An intelligence officer named Brian Urquhart, he studied these photos carefully. And he realized what he was looking at. German tanks. Not just any tanks, Panzer divisions. The 9th and 10th SS Panzer divisions pulled back to the Netherlands to refit after their mauling in France. These were elite units, equipped with Panthers and Tigers, and they were sitting right where the British paratroopers were supposed to land. Urquhart tried to sound the alarm. He showed the photos to his superiors. He argued the mission should be delayed or cancelled. The plan assumed they'd face second-rate German troops, old men and boys, not SS Panzer divisions. He was told to shut up, literally. His concerns were dismissed as pessimism. One senior officer suggested Urquhart was exhausted and sent him on medical leave, just removed him from the operation. The photos were filed away. There's more. Dutch resistance fighters, people who actually lived in Arnhem, sent warnings. They reported German tank activity. They detailed defensive positions. They even identified which SS divisions were present. This intelligence reached British headquarters. Some of it was shown to Montgomery. His response? He didn't believe it. Or didn't want to believe it. He'd committed to this plan. He'd sold it to Eisenhower. Changing course now would mean admitting error. So the warnings were downplayed. Considered unreliable, the Dutch resistance, people risking their lives to help, were ignored. Think about that for a second. You have photographic evidence, you have human intelligence from the ground, both telling you the same thing, enemy armor in the drop zone, and you proceed anyway. The maps also failed in showing defensive positions. German strongpoints along the highway the single road XXS Corps would use were poorly marked or not marked at all. The Germans had spent months fortifying this area. They expected an Allied push, the most easy battle for modern civil war. Residue a neighboring South small civil war fell. Concrete bunkers, anti-tank ditches, artillery pre-sighted on road junctions, machine gun nests in farmhouses. All of this existed. Little of it appeared on Allied planning maps with any accuracy. So when XXX Corps started their advance, they ran into surprise after surprise, defenses that shouldn't have been there, at least according to the maps. And the commanders, they compounded these problems. Lieutenant General Frederick Browning, deputy commander of the Airborne forces, he was shown the timeline. 64 miles in 48 hours, up a single road, linking up with paratroopers who'd be fighting without heavy weapons or armor support. He looked at this plan and said, famously, "I think we might be going a bridge too far." But he didn't cancel it. He expressed doubt and then went along. That phrase, "a bridge too far," it became the title of a book and movie about the operation. Even the man helping plan it knew it was flawed. September 17th, 1944. The operation launches. And almost immediately, reality crashes into the maps. The paratroopers drop. American 100 Honest Airborne at Arnhem, American 82nd Airborne at Nijmegen, British 1st Airborne at Arnhem. Thousands of men floating down from the sky. At Eindhoven and Nijmegen, things go reasonably well at first. The American units capture most of their objectives, but at Arnhem, disaster. Those 6-mile drop zones, the British have to march toward the bridge, and they run straight into the SS Panzer divisions that intelligence had warned about. German tanks appear within hours. The paratroopers have nothing that can stop a Panzer. Their anti-tank weapons are light, designed for fortifications and soft vehicles, not heavy armor. They're slaughtered. Only one battalion, about 750 men under Lieutenant Colonel John Frost, makes it to the Arnhem Bridge. Meanwhile, XXX Corps begins their advance from the Belgian border, and the nightmare scenario unfolds. That single road, the one the engineers had warned about, becomes a killing ground. German anti-tank guns hidden in the flooded polders. Artillery zeroed in on the highway. The lead tanks get hit, brew up, block the road. The entire advance stops. 30,000 vehicles sitting bumper to bumper, engineers scrambling to push wrecked tanks off the road, all while under fire. The maps had shown this as a quick dash, 2 days to Arnhem. Instead, it takes XXX Corps 4 days just to reach Nijmegen, 40 miles away. At Arnhem, Frost and his men are trapped. They hold the northern end of the bridge for 3 days. 3 days of brutal combat against overwhelming odds. German tanks firing point-blank into the buildings they're defending. Artillery pounding them constantly. They're running out of ammunition, out of medical supplies, out of hope. And XXX Corps isn't coming. Can't come. They're still fighting their way up that single road. The road that was supposed to be a highway to victory. The rest of the British 1st Airborne is pinned down in the suburbs. They'd been dropped miles from their objective because the map suggested it was safer. Now they're cut off, surrounded by SS Panzers, fighting house to house, woods to woods, taking massive casualties. Radio communications fail. The sets don't work properly. Some of this is equipment failure, but some of it is terrain. The radios were selected based on expected conditions from the maps. Flat, open Dutch farmland. But Arnhem is urban. Buildings. Trees. The radio signals can't get through. So units can't coordinate, can't call for support, can't even tell each other where they are. September 25th, 9 days after the operation started, the British finally evacuate what's left of the 1st Airborne from Arnhem. Of the 10,000 men who landed, only about 2,000 make it out. The rest are dead or captured. Frost is captured, badly wounded. His battalion fought to the last round. The bridge they held, that bridge that was supposed to open the road to Germany, stays in German hands. Operation Market Garden is over. A failure. The casualties are staggering. 1st Airborne Division effectively destroyed. 17,000 Allied casualties total, including Dutch civilians caught in the fighting. The Dutch would suffer even more. The Germans, furious at Dutch resistance support for the Allies, cut off food supplies to Western Netherlands. The hunger winter that followed killed 20,000 Dutch civilians. And what was gained? The Allies did capture the bridges at Eindhoven and Nijmegen. They pushed the front line forward about 50 miles. But they didn't cross the Rhine, didn't break into Germany. The war would drag on for 8 more months. After the battle, the finger-pointing began. Who was responsible? Montgomery blamed the weather, the radios, bad luck. He never quite admitted the plan was flawed. Some blamed the paratroopers for not fighting hard enough, which is obscene given their sacrifice. Others blamed the intelligence officers for not pushing harder with their warnings. But when you dig into it, when you really look at how this operation was planned and executed, you keep coming back to the same thing. The information was wrong, or it was right and ignored. The maps lied, not because cartographers were incompetent, but because the planners used outdated information and refused to update their assumptions. That single road, everyone could see it was a problem, but Montgomery was convinced speed would overcome it. The flooded terrain showed up on some reports, dismissed as exaggeration. The German armor at Arnhem, photographed, reported, and waved away. There's a lesson here that goes way beyond World War II. It's about the danger of confirmation bias. Montgomery wanted Market Garden to succeed. He'd been pushing for a northern strategy, his strategy, for months. Eisenhower had backed the American advance across France instead. This was Montgomery's chance to prove his approach was right. So when intelligence came in that contradicted his plan, he didn't adjust. He rejected it. He found reasons to dismiss it. The photos were unclear. The resistance reports were unreliable. The Dutch couldn't know what German units were present. And his staff, they enabled this. They wanted to please their commander. They wanted the plan to work. So they accepted his dismissals. They didn't push back hard enough. Brian Urquhart, the intelligence officer who spotted the panzers, he was literally sent away rather than listened to. This is how disasters happen. Not usually through one catastrophic error, but through a series of small failures. Outdated maps that aren't updated. Intelligence warnings that aren't acted on. Engineers who voice concerns but aren't heard. Assumptions that aren't questioned. And soldiers pay the price. The men of the 1st Airborne dropped into a nightmare that didn't have to happen. XX Corps crawling up that deadly road. The American paratroopers who succeeded at their objectives but couldn't help their British comrades. All of them victims of a plan built on faulty information and wishful thinking. You know what's haunting? After the war, when historians got access to German records, they found something interesting. The German commanders were shocked that Market Garden even happened. They looked at the same terrain, the same roads, and thought it was obvious such an operation would fail. The German general modeled that the single elevated highway was a perfect killing ground. Another called the drop zones at Arnhem incomprehensible given how far they were from the objective. They'd expected the Allies to land much closer, so they'd prepared defenses accordingly. The British, by following their flawed maps, accidentally avoided some German defenses but created worse problems for themselves. Field Marshal Walter Model, commanding German forces in the Netherlands, he was having lunch when the paratroopers started landing. His headquarters was near Arnhem. He thought it was a raid to capture him specifically. He fled into the woods. Only later did he realize the scale of what was happening, and even then he couldn't believe the Allies were really trying what they were trying. The legacy of Market Garden is complicated. It's remembered as a heroic failure. The courage of the paratroopers is undeniable. Films celebrate their stand. Books detail their sacrifice. And that's appropriate. Those men fought with everything they had. But the truth is messier. Market Garden was a preventable disaster. The information existed to avoid it, or dramatically improve it. Drop the paratroopers closer to the bridges. Use different routes for the ground advance. Wait until better intelligence could be gathered. Postpone until conditions improved. None of that happened, because the people making decisions looked at their maps, looked at their plans, and saw what they wanted to see, not what was actually there. There's a memorial at Arnhem now. Every year, veterans and their families gather. The Dutch people, they never forgot what the Allies tried to do for them. They remember the sacrifice. Streets are named after the fallen. Schools teach about the battle. And in the military academies, Market Garden is studied endlessly. It's a textbook case in what not to do, how not to plan an operation, how not to handle intelligence, how not to let ego and ambition override reality. But sometimes I wonder if we really learn these lessons. How many times since 1944 have military operations been launched based on faulty intelligence, on outdated assumptions, on maps, literal or figurative, that didn't match reality? The technology has improved. We have satellites now, drones, real-time reconnaissance. But the human factors remain. The pressure to act, the desire to believe your plan will work, the reluctance to accept information that contradicts your assumptions. Montgomery never really admitted Market Garden was a mistake. In his memoirs, he called it 90% successful. He captured most of the bridges after all, just not the last one, the important one. But you can't be 90% successful in a mission where the entire point was to capture all the bridges. That's like saying a flight was 90% successful because you made it 90% of the way across the ocean. The soldiers knew. The ones who fought there, who survived, they knew. They'd seen the intelligence failures firsthand. They'd fought on terrain that wasn't what they'd been told. They'd watched friends die because somebody didn't update a map or listen to a warning. One veteran, years later, was asked what he thought about Market Garden. He said, "We were brave, but brave isn't enough when you're sent to the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong information." That's the real story of Operation Market Garden. Not just a military defeat, but a failure of information, analysis, and leadership. A failure that cost thousands of lives. The maps lied, and men died. The next time you look at any plan, military or otherwise, remember Arnhem. Remember that beautiful, detailed maps can be completely wrong, that intelligence can be ignored, that warnings can be dismissed. And remember the paratroopers floating down from the sky that September morning, trusting that someone had done the homework, someone had checked the maps, someone had listened to the warnings. They deserved better.